All right, strap in everyone, because today we are taking a deep dive into something pretty wild.
Whoa.
Singularity in large language models.
Or as the cool kids call them,
LLMs.
LLMs, exactly.
Yeah, and this is a concept that honestly sounds like it's straight out of science fiction.
It really does. I mean, when you hear singularity, you think, robots taking over the world.
Right. Skynet.
Exactly. But what we're talking about here is actually a bit more nuanced, right? It's about these language models that are already becoming so integrated into our lives.
Right, we're talking about the ones writing articles,
Yeah.
composing music, all sorts of things.
I mean, you name it, they're doing it.
And the question is, what happens when they become so intelligent
Yeah.
that they surpass us?
Right. And we're not talking about just, being better at chess or something.
Right.
We're talking about AI that could be writing groundbreaking scientific theories,
Yeah.
composing entire symphonies,
Whoa.
maybe even running entire economies.
That's a little scary.
It is. It's exciting and a little terrifying at the same time.
So for this deep dive, we're looking at a paper titled Singularity in Large Language Models, LLM, Implications and Challenges.
And this paper really gets into the nitty-gritty of what this could all look like.
Yeah, and let me tell you, it is mind-blowing stuff.
Yeah.
So before we get ahead of ourselves, though,
Okay.
let's define what we actually mean by singularity in the context of LLMs.
Right, because it sounds pretty intense.
Yeah, it does.
Well, the paper defines LLM singularity as basically the point where these models become so advanced that they fundamentally change society as we know it.
So it's not just about AI getting smarter.
Right.
It's about AI reshaping the world as we know it.
Exactly. And they lay out 3 key characteristics that will signal we're getting close.
Okay, I am definitely intrigued. Let's hear it.
All right, so the first one is autonomy and self-improvement.
Autonomy and self-improvement.
So imagine an LLM that can actually tweak its own code,
Oh, okay.
leading to this exponential explosion in intelligence. It's basically learning how to learn better.
Yes, it designs a better version of itself.
Oh, wow.
Which then designs an even better one, and so on and so on.
It's like a runaway train of intelligence.
That's a great way to put it. And that brings us to the second characteristic.
Okay.
Superior linguistic understanding.
So they're not just mimicking human language.
Right. It's not just about sounding like us.
They're actually understanding it.
Yes. With a depth and nuance that rivals or even surpasses our own capabilities.
So we're talking about AI that can actually grasp the subtleties of language.
Yeah. The emotions behind the words, the context.
Wow. Okay, what's the third characteristic? This is fascinating.
The third one is transformative societal impact.
Transformative societal impact.
And this is where things get really, really interesting.
I'm all ears.
So the paper is suggesting that LLMs, with their self-improving intelligence and this incredible grasp of language, could have a revolutionary impact on virtually every aspect of society. So this isn't just, something for, tech nerds to worry about.
Yeah.
This is about tangible changes that could impact everyone's lives.
In a big way. And, for someone like you who loves diving into these topics,
Oh, absolutely.
the implications are huge.
Yeah, I mean, where do we even start with something this big?
Well, I think one of the most obvious areas where this could have a huge impact is science and knowledge.
Science and knowledge,
Yeah.
yeah. Because one of the biggest challenges in science right now is just the sheer volume of data.
Yeah, it's overwhelming.
It's totally overwhelming. So the paper argues that LLMs could actually change that.
You mean like having AI that could read and analyze every scientific paper ever published and then connect the dots in ways that humans simply can't?
Exactly. We're talking about accelerating scientific discovery, exponentially.
So we could see cures for diseases, new technologies develop, maybe even solutions to climate change.
It's possible.
Yeah.
And it could happen much faster than we ever imagined. Okay, but would that make human scientists, obsolete?
That's a good question, and the paper actually suggests that no, it wouldn't necessarily make them obsolete.
Okay.
Because what LLMs could do is actually free up human scientists from a lot of the tedious, data crunching.
The grunt work.
Exactly. And allow them to focus on the more creative and strategic aspects of their work.
So it's more like LLMs augmenting human capabilities, not replacing them.
Exactly. It's a partnership.
Okay, I like that.
Right.
So instead of replacing human scientists, AI would become this powerful tool that helps them be more effective and efficient.
Right. And that actually brings us to another area where LLMs could have a huge impact. Education.
Oh, yeah, education, of course. I mean, if AI can revolutionize science, just imagine what it could do for how we learn.
Exactly. Imagine a world where every student has access to a personalized AI tutor.
Whoa, hold on. Personalized AI tutor, like for every student?
For every student. And these tutors would be able to adapt to each student's individual needs and learning styles.
So no more one-size-fits-all classrooms.
Exactly.
Every student gets a learning experience that's tailored specifically to them.
That's the idea.
Huh.
It could be revolutionary, especially for students who struggle in traditional learning environments.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's not just about personalized learning either.
Oh.
Imagine LLMs creating entirely new forms of educational content.
Like what?
Interactive simulations,
Yeah.
things that bring complex concepts to life in a way that textbooks just can't.
That's amazing. I'm starting to get a little less scared and a little more excited about all this, I have to say.
I think that's the right attitude.
Yeah.
Because this is really powerful technology, and we need to be thinking about how we can use it for good.
Absolutely. But okay, so we've talked about science, education. What about something like art?
Art.
Can AI really influence something as subjective and human as creativity?
That's a great question, and that's actually where things get really fascinating. Because the paper suggests that LLMs, with their deep understanding of language and patterns, could actually collaborate with artists and musicians.
Really?
Yeah, to push the boundaries of creative expression even further.
So instead of replacing artists, AI could actually become a partner in the creative process.
That's the idea.
Interesting. So we could see like a symphony that's co-composed by an LLM and a human musician.
Yeah.
Or a painting that's a collaboration between a human artist and AI.
Exactly. The possibilities are pretty mind-boggling when you think about it.
I'm starting to get a sense of just how wide-reaching the impact of all this could be.
It's big.
I mean, we've talked about science, education, art, but let's face it.
Okay.
This level of AI integration is bound to have some major implications for the economy.
Oh, absolutely.
And the way we work.
It's a huge question, and the paper doesn't shy away from it.
Okay, good.
One of the biggest points that they raise is this potential for automation.
Right, automation. I mean, if AI can do all these things, what happens to all the jobs that people currently do?
And specifically, the paper talks about jobs that rely heavily on language.
So we're talking about journalists, lawyers, even programmers.
Yeah, all kinds of professions could potentially be impacted.
Okay, but does the paper offer any solutions for all those people whose jobs might be displaced by AI?
Well, one of the things they suggest is that the increased productivity that LLMs could bring about might lead to a complete overhaul of our economic systems.
A complete overhaul? Like, what would that even look like?
Well, we might see the rise of something like universal basic income.
Universal basic income. That's a pretty radical idea.
It is a radical idea.
Yeah, but I can see how it could be a potential solution in a world where AI is doing so much of the work.
Exactly. It's something that we might need to start taking seriously.
Okay, so we've got science, education, the arts, the economy.
It's a whole lot.
Where else could LLMs have a transformative impact?
Well, the paper also talks about how they could influence government and decision-making.
Oh, wow. So, like, LLMs advising governments on policy?
Exactly. Imagine them, using their vast knowledge and analytical abilities to help craft legislation, negotiate treaties.
Even predict potential outcomes.
Yeah. It could be a whole new era of data-driven governance.
I mean, that sounds promising.
It does.
But also a little unnerving.
I know, right? It's like, who controls the data?
Yeah. What if these LLMs are used to manipulate people or spread misinformation?
Those are all valid concerns.
Definitely.
And it's something that we're definitely going to need to explore further as we go deeper into this whole LLM singularity thing.
It seems like, even though the paper highlights all this incredible potential, it also acknowledges that there are some serious challenges and concerns that we need to address.
Oh, absolutely. It's not all sunshine and roses, right?
So what are some of the big technical limitations of LLMs? I mean, they seem pretty capable from what we've discussed so far.
They are capable, but one major limitation is that right now they're essentially very good at mimicking patterns. In the data they're trained on. But do they truly understand the meaning behind the language they generate?
So it's like a parrot repeating phrases without actually knowing what they mean.
A very sophisticated parrot, maybe, but yeah, that's a good analogy.
All right, okay, so understanding is a big question mark. What else?
Well, another crucial point is the lack of consciousness in LLMs.
Right, consciousness. We touched on that earlier.
Yeah, they're incredibly complex algorithms, but are they sentient? Do they have feelings, motivations?
Right, I mean, the paper suggests that this lack of consciousness is a major distinction.
A big one.
Between LLMs and human intelligence.
Yeah, and it raises so many questions, right?
Oh, yeah. Like, if they're not conscious, can they be held accountable for their actions?
That's a big one.
What if an AI makes a mistake?
Yeah.
Especially a life or death one.
It's a whole other can of worms.
It feels like we've only just scratched the surface here.
We got a lot more to unpack, that's for sure.
All right, well, I am ready to keep diving in.
Me too.
This is getting really interesting.
It's about to get even more interesting.
Okay, well, buckle up, everyone, because this deep dive is just getting started.
We're just getting warmed up. It's amazing to think about all the potential benefits, but we have to be realistic about the challenges, too.
Right, like we were just talking about. Can LLMs truly understand the way humans do?
Yeah, and that whole consciousness thing.
It's kind of freaky.
It is a bit, right? And the paper goes deep on this question of how we even define understanding when it comes to AI.
Yeah, because right now we mostly measure it by what AI can do.
Right, like can it solve problems or write creatively or hold a conversation?
But is that really understanding? Or is it just like really, really good mimicry?
It's a tough question, and it gets to the core of this debate about AI consciousness.
Yeah, I mean, could an LLM ever write a poem that's truly emotionally powerful? Or compose music that evokes deep feeling?
Some people argue that to truly understand something, you need to have subjective experiences.
Right, you need to be aware of yourself.
Exactly, aware of yourself as separate from the world.
And those are qualities that, at least for now, LLMs don't seem to have.
Right, but what if they get so good at mimicking those qualities that we can't tell the difference?
Would we still say they don't understand just because they're not biological?
It's a fascinating question, and it really makes us confront our own biases about what intelligence really is.
I mean, this could completely change how we define ourselves as humans.
Exactly. It's like, are we special just because we're made of flesh and blood?
Okay, that's a whole other deep dive right there.
I could talk about that for hours.
Maybe another time, but for now, let's get back to some of the more practical challenges.
Like the impact on jobs.
Yeah, because even if these AIs aren't conscious, they could still take our jobs.
And the paper definitely talks about that, especially for people whose work involves a lot of language.
So what happens if journalists and lawyers and copywriters are all replaced by LLMs?
Well, some experts believe we need to totally rethink how we approach work and education.
So are we talking about retraining people?
Mm-hmm.
Teaching them new skills?
Maybe. Or even something more radical like that universal basic income idea we talked about.
Right, where everyone gets a guaranteed income even if they don't have a traditional job.
Exactly. It might mean redefining what work even means.
I mean, it's not that crazy to think about. Maybe in the future, work will be less about specific tasks.
Right, less about routine stuff.
And more about creativity and problem solving and the things that require uniquely human qualities.
Like empathy and compassion.
Yeah, things that AI can't replicate.
At least not yet.
So it's about finding that balance, a partnership where humans and AI each contribute what they do best.
I like that, a partnership.
Okay, so retraining, redefining work, maybe UBI, those are some potential solutions. But the paper also talks about the darker side.
The risk of misuse, yeah.
What are we talking about here? What could go wrong?
Well, imagine these super advanced language models getting into the wrong hands.
Oh, no.
Think about the potential for propaganda, fake news, creating deepfakes that are so convincing they could destabilize entire countries.
That's scary.
It is. Because LLMs understand human language so well, they could be used for really effective manipulation.
So it's like we wouldn't even be able to trust what we see and hear anymore.
It's a real concern, so we need to figure out how to protect ourselves.
So what can we do?
Well, it's going to take a multi-pronged approach, right? We need strong cybersecurity to prevent these models from being stolen.
Okay, that makes sense.
We need to develop ethical guidelines for how AI is developed, maybe even international treaties to make sure it's not being weaponized.
So we're talking about global cooperation.
Yeah, it's a huge challenge.
It sounds like it.
But we can't afford to be naive about the dangers here, right?
No, absolutely not. And you said earlier there's also the issue of unintended consequences.
Yeah, even if no one's deliberately misusing these models.
What happens when they get so complex that we don't understand how they work?
It's like that black box problem where the AI makes decisions, but we don't know why.
And that's a problem, especially if those decisions are having real-world impacts.
Absolutely, which means we need ongoing research, not just to make LLMs better,
but to make sure we understand them.
Exactly, and that we can control them even as they become more powerful and autonomous.
It's like walking a tightrope, trying to harness this incredible technology without letting it get away from us.
That's a great analogy.
And it also highlights why it's so important to have lots of different voices in this conversation.
Not just tech people.
Right. We need ethicists and policymakers and social scientists.
We need everyone at the table because this isn't just a technological challenge, it's a societal one.
Okay, so we've talked about the benefits, we've talked about the risks, but this paper also hints at something much deeper, right?
It really does.
It challenges our very understanding of what intelligence and consciousness are.
It forces us to ask, what does it mean to be intelligent?
Because for centuries, we've defined intelligence based on what humans can do.
Right, but what happens when we create machines that can do those things even better than us?
Does that mean they're intelligent in the same way?
Maybe. Or maybe it's something entirely different.
Yeah, like if a machine writes a novel, does it matter if it doesn't feel the same way about it as a human author would?
These are questions philosophers have been debating for ages.
And now with AI, those questions are becoming real.
Exactly. They're not just hypothetical anymore.
It feels like we're on the verge of a huge shift.
A change in how we understand ourselves and our place in the universe.
Okay, that is a lot to take in.
It is. But before we go too deep into that rabbit hole, let's bring it back down to earth a little bit.
Okay.
Because the paper also talks about some more concrete ways to navigate this whole LLM singularity thing.
Okay, good. Because I need a little grounding right now.
Right. So we've already touched on retraining for new jobs, rethinking how we define work, setting ethical boundaries.
What else?
Well, let's start with education. What skills do people need to thrive in a world where LLMs are everywhere?
What should we be teaching kids?
We need to move away from that old model of memorizing facts and figures.
Right, rote learning.
Exactly, and focus on teaching people how to be adaptable, how to think critically.
Problem solving.
Creative thinking, collaboration.
So it's less about specific skills and more about having the right mindset.
Yes. It's about lifelong learning, being able to pick up new things quickly.
Because those are the qualities that will set humans apart from AI.
Exactly. And even with the best education, we still need rules, right?
Regulation and oversight.
We have to figure out the ethical and legal frameworks for developing and using these LLMs.
And we're talking about bias and transparency.
Accountability, data privacy.
That's a lot.
It is a lot,
right?
But we have to get it right.
And it sounds like this can't just be decided by a few experts, right?
Yeah, no, we need a global conversation about AI and the role it's going to play in our lives.
We need to get the public involved.
Exactly. Make it a democratic process where everyone has a say.
Okay, well, that's a powerful idea.
It is. It's about making sure AI serves humanity.
I like that.
Not the other way around.
I have to admit, I'm still feeling a bit apprehensive about all this. It's exciting, but also a little terrifying.
I get it. It's a lot to wrap your head around.
This deep dive has been really informative, but it's also given me a lot to think about.
Good. That's the point.
So what's next? Where do we go from here?
Well, the paper goes even deeper into some of the specific risks and challenges, and it also offers some really interesting ideas for how we can navigate all this.
Okay, I am ready for the next stage of our deep dive. Let's hear it.
So we've talked about how LLMs could help us tackle some of the biggest challenges facing humanity.
Yeah, curing diseases, solving climate change, all that good stuff.
But we also need to be honest about the potential downsides, right?
You mentioned earlier the risk of these models being misused.
Exactly. What happens when this incredible power falls into the wrong hands?
Paint me a picture. What's the worst case scenario?
Imagine a world where LLMs are used to create incredibly convincing propaganda, spreading disinformation, generating deepfakes so realistic that they could destabilize entire governments or even incite violence.
I mean, we've already seen how fake news can spread like wildfire online.
And with LLMs, it could be amplified to a whole new level.
It's a terrifying thought, honestly. Like, we wouldn't even know what to believe anymore.
Right. And because these models understand human language so well, they could be used to manipulate people in ways that we haven't even imagined yet.
So how do we protect ourselves from that? It sounds like a nightmare scenario.
Well, there's no easy answer. It's going to require a multi-pronged approach.
Okay, like what?
Well, first of all, we need to invest in robust cybersecurity measures.
To prevent these models from being hacked or stolen, right?
Exactly. We also need to develop strong ethical guidelines for AI development and maybe even international treaties to regulate the use of these technologies.
So it's not just about technological solutions, it's about global cooperation.
Exactly. It's a huge challenge, but we need to start working on it now.
Right, because the stakes are pretty high.
Absolutely. And it's not just about preventing malicious actors from misusing LLMs. We also need to consider the unintended consequences.
Right, the stuff that happens even when no one's deliberately trying to do harm.
Exactly. Like, what happens when these models become so complex that we don't even understand how they work anymore?
That's a bit unsettling, to say the least.
It's like creating something that's beyond our control.
And if these models are making decisions that impact our lives in healthcare, finance, transportation, that's a big problem.
Absolutely. So we need to prioritize ongoing research, not just to make LLMs more capable.
But to make sure we understand them.
Exactly, and that we can control them, even as they become more sophisticated and autonomous.
It's like we need to stay one step ahead.
Yeah. It's a delicate balance, harnessing the power of this technology while making sure it doesn't get away from us.
It's a lot to think about. And to be honest, it's a little overwhelming.
I understand, but I think it's important to remember that the future is not set in stone.
Okay, so it's not like we're just on this runaway train headed for some inevitable AI takeover.
No, the future of AI is still being written, and we have a role to play in shaping it.
So we need to make conscious choices about how we develop and integrate AI into our lives.
Absolutely. It's about harnessing this incredible power for good.
While also being aware of the potential risks.
Exactly. And this conversation needs to involve everyone, not just the tech experts.
Right, because this is about the future of humanity.
Exactly. And it's up to all of us to decide what that future looks like.
Well, you've given us a lot to think about, that's for sure. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
I think the biggest takeaway for me is that amidst all the potential risks and challenges, there's also a tremendous amount of hope.
Hope for what?
Hope for a future where AI helps us solve some of humanity's most pressing problems. Hope for a future where AI enhances our creativity and expands our understanding of the universe. Hope for a future where AI helps us build a more equitable and just world.
That's a future I can get behind.
I think we all can. And it's a future that I believe is within our reach if we approach this technology with both wisdom and courage.
I like that. Wisdom and courage.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us on this incredible deep dive into the world of LLMs.
It's been a pleasure.
And to our listeners, we hope you enjoy the journey. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.
Keep diving deep. I have